First of all, thanks everybody for joining us. This is my name is Chris Cline. I'm the executive director of the Agents Council for Technology with the big I, and we'll get a little bit more formal introduction here in a moment. But this is our first webinar of 2024, and it's really exciting to bring it to you with our partner KIte Technologies and the Microsoft Teams guru, which you will see, Mr. Adam Atwell. And going to go through some housekeeping items. We'll go through the agenda today, but just as a quick primer, as you start to wonder, we're going to talk a little bit about some why, some philosophy, how culture weaves into this stuff, but we promise you we're actually going to do live demos and show you some practical ways teams can make a material difference in the way your agency operates. Yeah, so as I mentioned, my name is Chris Cline. I am the executive director of the Agents Council for Technology. Really brief commercial on that. If your agency is a member of your state big I, you are a member of ACT. You are a member of the Agents Council for Technology. We are an included benefit that comes along with your agency's big I membership. And in a small nutshell here, we are a nonprofit organization that brings together agents, brokers, carrier members, and technology providers to talk about the issues and the opportunities that your agency and really the industry is dealing with as it relates to technology and how you can utilize technology to bring your unique strategy to life. And we are 100% funded by organizations like KIte Technology and other partners that you can find on our website, and there's a link later. So huge thanks to Adam and the team at KIte for their partnership, because it's this kind of relationship with technical expertise that we're able to bring to our agency members and the carriers and other partners that provide us. And I'll say this, I'm excited about this Teams. While I'll be sort of moderating this discussion today, I'm also a student. So I've been exposed to Teams and used Teams over the years, and I'm probably one of those folks that would say Teams has still got some things to work out, but there's some really great capabilities inside Teams that can enhance collaboration and communication in your firm. And Adam's going to show us how that works today. So thanks, Adam.
Yeah, for sure, Chris. We're probably going to thank you guys to death, but Chris and I are definitely excited to be here together. We've been working together in partnership, Big I and ACT at Big I and KIte Tech for a few years. As things do, we're just kind of getting our strategy off the ground here with this kickoff to the new year for us as well. My name, Chris said it 3 times at least, Adam Atwell. I'm a Microsoft MVP, which basically means Microsoft thinks I know a few things, so they recognize me for that. I'm also a partner here at KIte Technology Group. Been here for about 12 years. My passion is my wife, my 2 boys, 5 and 6, and of course what I do here in our company and helping lead agencies and our other clients around growth and adoption in technology, specifically Microsoft, of course, their cloud infrastructure. And then I do have a dose of Apple in my blood. My kids' middle names are Macintosh. Off the record, personal facts aside, who we are as a business, we do managed IT services. We also do consulting. We've served the nation, if you will, for about 30 years now. We are talking to folks in Canada, which is really cool. And then we do fully managed IT, co-managed IT, Microsoft 365 tenant management. We do live help desk, security and compliance consulting around both Apple and Microsoft, and then applied Epic consulting.
So real quickly then, and we talked a little bit about this, but we're going to talk today through these agenda items. Why Microsoft Teams? Beyond the fact that it's probably installed on most of our computers if you have any Microsoft product, how you can think about using these tools or technology to cultivate an even stronger company culture or to bring your culture to life. How can we think more strategically about leveraging chat capabilities in your organization? What are some best practices for setting up channels in Teams, which from my perspective is one of the really, really big capabilities that nobody talks about. And then at the end, we'll close with some ideas about how do you start to drive adoption for some new tools through your organization. It'll be specific to this Teams lens, but things that you can apply across any other new technology installation in your organization. And then as Adam mentioned, if both of us can kind of keep ourselves in check, we like to talk. our intention is to give a live Q&A at the end of this thing. So hold us to that, raise your hand and be ready to ask questions, because Eleni and Rachel on the behind the stage here will be monitoring that and giving us cues. So at any rate, that's our agenda today. There we go. Let's just do this. Adam, I want to turn it over to you, right? And we've alluded to this thing. Why Microsoft Teams beyond the fact that all of us now need to figure out how to video conference?
For sure. Yeah, great question, Chris. You guys are going to see a poll pop on your screen here in a moment, and just we want to kind of represent who we are in the audience and what we're using. The question of why Microsoft Teams, really, I mean, a few reasons. One, why spend more money or learn more things if you have things in front of you can use, right? And so I think that was probably the compelling thing that's driven a lot of the marketplace and us as a business, right, to adopt Teams. We see money we're already spending and tool crossover and overlap where, hey, can Teams do Zoom? Can Teams do webinars as good as Zoom? Well, it depends who you ask. Maybe, maybe not. But can it do it well enough and save us $200 a year? Does that matter? Those kinds of things. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is, it's where you work already. Almost 9 out of 10 agencies, I'm making up metrics right now, don't call me Gardner, but I would venture to guess that probably a good 9 out of 10 agencies do use a Microsoft product in their business, whether they're on Microsoft 365 or not, maybe not, right? But certainly they're using Office apps. They've been exposed to the other things like hosted email, and they may likely be on their way to Microsoft. And so, what we find is you're already in a place where you're comfortable. When you see Microsoft, they do development and integrate across their product suite now, not just here's Office on your desktop, and then, hey, I'll give you these things in the cloud. Now they're really bridging all those things together, and Teams is the cornerstone of that collaboration. As we moved away from the 19 year and the Rona, as some people call it for fun, we found that Teams was a cornerstone to our communication in our business. And I think we've seen that, adopted across others as well. So that's a little bit on the why.
Yeah, I was going to comment too, and we'll weave this through, and you alluded to this, Adam, is that one of the things we hear at ACT is that agency staff just goes into too many tools. And they wish they could streamline the amount of resources and the amount of things they need to log into and learn how to use. And so in the spirit of this, one of the themes is that you'll hear us at ACT and some of our other partners is, before you go out and buy new stuff, let's make sure you're maximizing the capabilities of things you already possess or might already be able to just make some tweaks to expand capabilities within. And then as Adam mentioned, many of us are using Microsoft tools. And so rather than buying some other or creating subscriptions for other video conferencing, try Teams, Slack, some of the other chat mechanisms, some things that we'll go through that they're quasi competitors, but they tend to show up here, and there's some capabilities in Teams. So understand that this is an idea of maximizing what you already have, so your staff doesn't need to go into more and more things to be productive.
Yep, for sure. Awesome. Well, let's dive in to just a little bit of an overview. This is a visual, right? Chris and I are wordy people. We often get told to stop speaking. So this is just a picture, right? And you can see here, this is kind of the cornerstone of what you see in Teams, right? And so I'm just going to talk at a few of these things. Of course, it's a place where you can host meetings. We're in one now. We're in a meeting of type webinar, right? So we have some special things going on here in the webinar experience. You can also collaborate on your documents if they're living in Microsoft 365. You can also manage your contacts that you save inside of your Outlook. You can get over to managing projects or groups that you're a part of, initiatives that live in the Microsoft space. You can store and share those files, not just collaborate on them. And then, of course, you can bring in other applications like Asana is a big one that I hear. Certain people want to bring in data maybe from Dropbox or Google. There's ways to integrate third-party non-Microsoft applications right into the flow work in Teams. And then kind of last but not least is chat and call. A lot of people say, okay, yeah, sure, we did it for meetings. We get the meeting invite, we go. a lot of people don't realize some real practical things you can do outside of meetings. So chat, we're going to dive into in more detail, but calling, I just want to highlight with another visual. And calling, a lot of folks don't really think about telephone necessarily, the old PSTN, traditional dial-in number. But Teams actually, in addition to all of its native functionality, you can bolt on additional functionality for more dollars. And one of them is a telephone system. And so you can see this represented in the visual here of, a dial pad with the application. We call it a soft phone. And then you see other things integrated right there in the picture. We're not going to go over all of them, but simply said, voicemail, call log, and then statuses for other folks, right? You can see Maria is over there on the side and she looks available to me. And so this is just a quick view. Teams is definitely, as far as telephone system side goes, it's growing in that capability. It has Skype for Business as the foundation, and it continues to grow. There are some things that Microsoft doesn't have there yet. So if you can get by with the 80-20 rule and find, a third-party integration or a different way to solve a problem, you might find it to be high value, to be streamlined in what you're doing. The same call experience, just like everything else in Teams, is available across any platform: web, mobile, desktop, Mac, PC, and so on. So that I just wanted to, kind of level set on that to expand our brains as we prepare for the next set of questions and conversation.
Just
sound good?
Just real quick on that, Adam, the phone capability. We have Teams as one of our options here at the Big I, and not only would you use it for video conferencing like this, but I have the app on my mobile phone, and so I travel a bit for work, and so I can still keep current with my coworkers through the chat feature, which we'll talk about later, but also the call feature. And you can actually do the video calling, or you can do just voice to voice right through the app on your phone. So most people, again, I would suspect, don't think about Teams as an option to a third party phone system for their organization.
It's a common missed feature set because it's not bolted in to the core stack and you got to pay extra for it. But it's great to know that it's there, and it works for some niche scenarios as well. Maybe, and you can also, side note, integrate it with an existing phone system. You don't have to just be in Teams. So you do have options there as well. Awesome.
Yeah, let's advance. So let's start here for a little bit. Why would we be thinking about software as a way to facilitate company culture and communication and transparency and the ability to share mission and vision and to have other people be able to interact and ask questions, kind of like the old school holler across the cubicle wall kind of thing? We won't spend a lot of time talking about culture in general, although I could spend days talking about how important I believe culture is. So this makes some presumption that your organization has a culture, is working on one, and one that you would like to bring to life. But the thing that a lot of organizations struggle with, and Adam alluded to, the pandemic and those types of things, was all of a sudden, many people were now working remote, and now we're trying to bring people back into different hybrid and flexible work schedules, and want to know about or struggle with, how do we keep our culture alive in these dynamics of inclusivity and collaboration? And one of the things about Teams is it's really building some really strong muscle to be able to help those kind of things. And so from a practical and tactical perspective, Adam has some great best practices here around bringing and keeping a strong culture alive in your organization with the capabilities of Teams. And I'd love you to kind of elaborate on those.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the first one really is this thing right here called your face. Most people, a lot of people now, if they had a choice, they probably would come into a meeting with their camera off. And being someone who is highly technical and highly people, I can't really connect with people honestly without pictures unless I'm in person with them. I find it really hard to be relational with folks, and I think a lot of folks do that as well. It's not just something that's unique to me, it's how we connect with people. And so that being said, cameras on, real talk, is a really good best practice to adopt. Sometimes we have a bad hair day. I put gel in my hair today. I did a little extra for you guys. I didn't hide my cat here today. She's over there. There's some reading material and a coaster somewhere back there. And it looks like, honestly, Chris, a toilet paper roll, which my kids use for building crafts and creations. So, this is me. Come as you are is the second principle, in case you didn't know that I was leading up for that. It just goes to the level of connecting with people on a real level, right? A lot of folks are very business mode, and that's fine. I'm not discouraging being professional here. There is a level of professionalism you need to have, but being yourself, that translates really, really well in collaboration. That's not unique to teams. That's regardless of how you're connecting. One other thing that I'll say is, in terms of kind of a communication cadence, I might describe it as, or kind of some do's and do nots, right? Etiquette is another word that I've heard referred to. And these are really the kind of thing that you want to do is you want to honor everyone in the time you have that you're spending. So putting structure around how to communicate, whether it's at the top of the meeting saying, please keep your cameras on. The ground rules here are cameras on, mics muted. If you need a bathroom break, no problem. Just go ahead and turn your camera off. That gives us an indication that you're stepping out for a minute. Please do be attentive. And when you get back from your drink break, turn that camera right back on so we know you're here. And so every business has different ground rules, but it's important you write them down and you hold folks accountable to them if you care about cultivating a strong culture. Those are a couple of things that come to mind there for me, Chris.
Yeah, those are great. And I was just thinking about almost just elaborating on those and thinking about an environment where, like, what are some of the basic expectations of your teammates when everybody's in the office together? And one of them is a little bit of latitude between calls, right? I came from a larger corporate environment, and depending on your size, if you have meetings that are back to back, we would typically provide some grace to people to stop off and you can take a biology break or top off their coffee or one of those types of things. And so I think in the digital meeting realm, what quickly started to happen is that 1 minute after the hour, people started to instant message or text people like, are you coming? Are you coming? Are you coming? And in an in-person environment, we probably wouldn't be getting overly anxious about somebody arriving a couple minutes late, realizing they might have been coming from another meeting or another call. But one of the best practices I started to learn about this when we think about these digital meetings and these visual video conference calls in enhancing culture and coming as you are and allowing people to have some latitude in their life is to schedule meetings that don't last a full 60 minutes. And so if you're going to start a meeting at the top of the hour, book it for 45, book it for 50 minutes. Does a couple things. A, it builds in buffer time for everybody to catch your breath.
Yeah.
Go TP the neighbors, apparently. That's what Adam does between meetings.
Yeah, with my kids.
But it also sets an expectation that, hey, we can get some stuff done a little bit quicker too. We don't need to necessarily exhaust a whole hour for meetings. And so it puts some urgency on it. So that was one that I thought was pretty important. And I'll kind of wrap up with this, but many years ago, I was able to, in my prior role, have a leadership responsibility for some remote employees. This would have been well before the pandemic. And this stuck with me because I had a mentor tell me at that time that when you're leading folks who aren't in the home office every day or don't come into the office every single day, there's a lot of benefit that come with that. But one of the downsides is they don't have the luxury of the water cooler talk or people that walk to lunch after a meeting and sort of explore things. And so people who do not come to the office every single day, whether they know it or not, do need more frequency and reinforcement in the messaging and the expectations and why an organization is doing something that they're doing it. And just, the overall change management vibe. This is really a big part of the culture. So as you start to embrace people who aren't in the office every day, think about how you can add more frequency and more intentionality to the communications they receive. And one of the things I love about Teams is, and Adam will do a demo on this not too long from now, on channels. Channels are a phenomenal way to build a communication infrastructure, really however your organization chooses to see fit. I think there was a question around integrating it into your workflows. That's a good spot, I think, to talk about that. So I'll stop there on culture, and Adam, we can move on unless you have any other thoughts.
I think I would love to give a little bit of visual affirmation, if you will, that we're on the right track here and that you guys are, jiving with what we're saying. Any kind of a reaction, if this stuff does it feel relevant? Chris and I want to make sure we're on the mark here. We're not going to take live questions yet. We will take those at the end. But I appreciate the name who just raised their hand. I do know who you are. Thanks for being here. So
I love
let's go ahead and jump forward.
Confettis of thumbs up across the bottom of the screen.
Right.
Definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
That's awesome, for sure. All right, so let's talk about streamlining communication with chat. We're gonna kind of for this one, we're gonna kind of be word light on the slide, and then we'll really kind of highlight a few things quick here, and then we'll show them visually with the demo a bit better. There's a bit of kind of chat pieces that really, really track better with pictures. And I don't want to break up our presentation here that our marketing team so awesomely put together. But let's cover a couple of those points, Chris, that we had talked about. What do you think? Maybe the first one, the email scenario?
Yeah, I think that's a thing, right? I mean, everybody sort of went into this stuff without, and all of a sudden now we're interacting on video and we're not in the same room. And, I grew up in a larger organization where part of the culture and the way people learned and developed their talents and validated decision making was to holler across the cubicle aisle or the person that was sitting around the corner.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I mean, now I spend my life in what was a spare bedroom. I'm told I have to call this my office now. And chat is a great mechanism now to collaborate in real time Q&A with folks that are on your team. And Adam, you'll talk about some practices here. It doesn't work that way, but it can with just some awareness. So I'll let you kind of just dive in with some thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, I think two things that kind of stand out with chat. One is, sorry, I have a little bit of a dry cough that's almost gone, but there's three things that are humoring my brain right now. One is the chat, the email. And when I say the email, I mean all of the emails, the reply chain that should have been a chat conversation with a thumbs up. So raise your hands or show me a little emoji, a reaction, they're called for branding purposes. Raise your hands or react to, have you ever had an email that never ended? Have you ever had an email that never ended that you wish just could have not been an email chain because Adam and Chris took it off the rails 3 replies in, right? And then have you ever had an email that I sent out to the wrong audience and I got all the feedback that I didn't want, right? Or maybe it shouldn't have been scoped that way. All those scenarios really can be better managed with structured chat in your organization. And so team chat, we'll see what that looks like, but think about that visually just for a minute. What if I lived in a world where there were less threaded emails that really I needed counseling for, right? I mean, there's only so many counseling dollars available. So that's email as a chat. The other one is kind of that question around the audience, right? Is this audience wider than it needs to be? Who really needs this? This is a critical and a crucial thought in communication practice. When you ask yourself the question, who should I send this to? What feedback do I need? And it just flows better with chat because chat's more forgiving in that, you can expand on it, you can reply to it, you can easily get back to it. In that same vein about chat, you want to really think about, and Chris, I know this is, I don't want to put you up, and hang you out to dry, I guess, but I know I am the guy that writes 16 messages that should be one thread, like just, like 3 paragraphs, nice and neatly organized, rather than message, send, message, send, message, send. Don't be me. Don't be that guy. I do a lot of things really well with technology. Communicating with text is not a strength of mine. And so I'm working on that. But don't be the guy who sends 16 messages that you could have just got in one thought. So that's, yeah,
I
what
think
do you got on that? Are you that guy
well,
too?
I'm
Side note.
probably that person, right?
Yeah.
And it's, I think that we think about chat similar to the way we think about text, short snippets, sound bites oftentimes, and that's a balance, right, for your organization to figure out. I tend to view chat as in the same vein as come as you are. But I think the spirit of what you're talking about, Adam, is if people have their sound on in their computer, likely they're getting a ping every time, there's a chat that pops up. And
Right.
so it's ping, 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 ping.
Yep.
And so the idea there is write your thought as one chat. And
Yep.
that way it's a little bit more sensible to the folks who are
That,
receiving it.
yeah. Yep.
And maybe this is comma bridging into your next thing here too. I think there's a power inside chat with Teams and some of the other as well, as your ability as the potential recipient of a chat to manage expectations back. So very
Yep.
few people know that there's a way to change your status bar.
For sure.
And if you're an organization, so some of them, if you use the phone system, will indicate that the person's on the phone, or if they're actually in a Teams meeting, like right now, if you're a Teams user,
Yep.
your status to somebody might look like you're in a scheduled meeting. And that starts to set those are some built-in tools that let somebody know that if they send you a chat message, you may not respond right away.
That's right.
And so that's one of the things that I think is worth talking about within the culture of your organization, or at least in smaller teams.
Yeah.
Is what's the service level agreement you have around an expected reply?
That's right.
I think over my career, I've been one of those folks guilty of quit bothering me when I get one, and darn it, I sent you a chat, give me a response.
Yeah. Why
right?
haven't you responded, guy?
And
Yeah,
I think that's a balance that we all probably struggle with, because it's not a
that's
text,
huge.
but it's
Yeah,
not an email.
The notification fatigue is, I was thinking about how many times I annoy my wife by sending 16 messages that could just be one. That's where my head was at, and explaining that you may be that spouse as well. But the other side of it, in terms of the input fatigue, is real. When you're sitting here trying to focus and you are dialed in, right? You don't want interruptions of emails up. You don't want chat bubbles. You don't want calls coming in. And so really, there's both sides to that coin. One is being sensitive to what you're sending for others, right? And so some of those baked in features you called out that are in Teams, they're in others too. Teams, I think, does a better job of it and more extensible. One is the status, right? There's an overall status. Am I online, offline, whatever. In addition to that, there's a message you can send. Don't expect a response. I'm in meetings all day, right? Beyond your status, you can add words. You can also do the out of office reply tie as well. And then lastly, you can actually buffer and build in focus times where you can cut and manage the notifications off, and they're very extensive. And so that's one. And go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
No, sorry to interrupt you, Adam. I was going to say, this is where your organization's culture is important, right? And there are some places, I think, as I talk to others around the industry, like, that encourage us to take some resiliency time, right? And if you're a work at home employee, go on a walk, take the dog out, be allowed to go take a lunch break. But maybe there's some we're hanging on to some fear of putting in a status that, hey, I'm not available. I'm going to take 30 minutes to, run down to the drugstore real quick. I mean, I think that's part of what your organization has to define, and to not let there be sort of any negative ramifications or consequences for putting yourself unavailable, as long as it's within whatever protocol. And every organization has to think about that on their own. And if you want to be away for a while at lunch within whatever your pay model is like, that's something that you could explore. Or if you're away for a while, or if, hey, I'm going heads down to work on and dive into Excel for a while, or work on a heavy renewal or whatever it is you're working on in your agency, I think it's worth having a conversation with whoever's leading the team you're a part of or the organization and say, are we permitted to go off chat or that? Those kind of
Yep.
things. And so don't go rogue and be like, yep, I'm just not going to respond to my teammates for the next hour. Like,
Right.
have that conversation and define it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that is the buffer times or the focus times that you can build in with some of the they're called Viva Insights now, features that are integrated with the team's experience, but you can build in the time to check your emails at the end of the day, to respond to chats at the end of the day, and then that will show up on your calendar and it will say focus time or email time. And then not only do you have, a cadence for doing the work, you have a baked in expectation you've set for when you'll do those things to a degree. And then the other thing, of course, is at a department or organization wide level, establish those cadences pretty tight, in terms of your communication rhythms. I think we beat it a while. I think pictures are going to help kind of lock in some of these things we talked about. Chris, you good for us to jump forward?
Keep rolling, man.
All right, let's do it. So we're at the demo time now, and Chris, I'm going to go into overload word mode just to try to keep our pace on track here. We do want to make sure that we get to you all's questions, and so I'm sorry, I'm zooming in because I'm going to do something completely outside of webinar practices, and just bring this up because my eyes couldn't see it. All right, great. We're going to jump here so we can bring the presentation back and just cover this and then go back to the demo and the team's channels. So let's just talk for a quick 2 minutes about this, Chris. And really, two primary things I'll call out. One is that if you're going to drive adoption or change management through any technology, this is not specific and true to teams. This really extends on to almost any technology, any really process either. It's not even tied to technology. One, you need a plan, right? You need agency-wide buy-in. I'm actually just going to jump straight to this because this is really the gold of this. You need a vision, you need leadership support, you need to expect changes to come, you need to train your end users, you need to reevaluate your vision in a cycle, annual, quarterly, monthly, whatever it is that makes sense based on the cadence of change in your business and organization. And then you probably need help from someone. This isn't a sales pitch for me. This isn't a sales pitch for Chris. There's lots of folks out there that can help. You just need to know when you're not an expert, right? And you need to be not afraid to ask for leadership, for dollars to spend it for a plan that you buy in. This is a blueprint that we've been using for years in strategic thinking applied to the technology we help with. So take a screenshot of it, get a peek of it. This is a great basic plan. That was 2 jumps, so we could just go right into the dive. Chris, I'm going to give you a quick chance to respond before we do.
Yeah, and so this recording will go out later, as Adam said. So this slide will be something that you can refer to. But I think I just want to double click on a couple things Adam referred to here. Is that when you're trying to think about technology-based changes in your organization, starting with the vision, which is the why, if you're a Simon Sinek fan, and really what problems or opportunities you're specifically trying to solve for. Because otherwise, putting new technology on top of something will make it really hard to articulate downstream what it was you're trying to accomplish. And that's it's more common than it needs to be dilemma that organizations deal with. Is senior teams think, hey, there's a new thing, this is going to help our organization, let's go buy it and subscribe to it. And there's not really structured thought down through the organization to the people who are the end users to understand why they're making the change, what's expected of them in terms of their different behavior. So there was a question about workflows. I'm a massive advocate of people, process, and technology, and starting with people, helping them understand why, giving them the tools and the latitude to learn, as well as being intentional about looking at your current processes and putting technology over across an existing set of process and not necessarily changing the process likely won't yield the results you're hoping for. And in fact, it could actually go the other way and make things more complex. And so there's a lot to this, and when it comes to change management. And so that's why we talked about chat, and why we'll talk about channels so much here, is because there's as much about behavior change and expectations change as it is about the tool. And without that level of clarity and expectation, and maybe even building and get into job descriptions and performance management and coaching dialogue, it won't be implemented the way you want. And then you end up with a lot of employees running the organization in their own unique way. And that doesn't necessarily benefit anybody. So a lot to that, but it's really important to know why you're implementing technology and what your hopeful outcome is, so that there's intentional and minimal change and disruption in your organization.
For sure. Awesome. All right, so let me set a cadence for how we're going to spend the next 20 minutes. I try to set good expectations. And so we have it looks like four questions that are already in the chat. If you know you have a question that you would like to come off mute and share, can we get those hands raised now so I can set a pace to honor those questions being asked and answered to the best of our ability? What we're going to do is we're going to jump into the live demo now. I am going to fly through things, guys. I talk fast. I'm going to intentionally talk fast to set the pace here. I will be specific and intentional, and we'll have this recording in post, so please don't be angry. Also, we will be sharing a resource with you that you'll get in the follow-up email. It will have a bunch of really good reference links. I'm not going to go through those today in the interest of time, but be on the lookout for that. That being said, I'm going to move this panel around and get my screen all tuned up. Stand by just in a moment, please. And if I could get some Teams reactions of joy, if you can see a browser. It's a very specific ask. Yay, I got one joy. All right, I'm going to stop counting. Welcome to Teams in the Web. You can see here, this is a demo tenant that I've built. I've already started off on the Teams toggle on the side. These are called apps on the left-hand side. This is the app bar. Your organization can set what apps you drive here. Earlier, I mentioned to you, you can add more apps, right? I talked about third party. These are first party apps that you can come in here. So if your organization uses Excel a lot or Copilot, any of the first party apps, you can see them, pin them, and ask IT to help organize that. In addition to that, here's the third party apps. Now, I will say with a dose of caution here, you don't just want to add anything. Chances are your IT department probably isn't managing what you can and can't do here. So just to keep things in check from a security, compliance, and process standpoint, my firm recommendation is if you see something here that you can click, get IT to vet it first before you hit the button. Again, there's so many things here that a lot of times it's hard to keep up with the controls of managing them. But if you're curious what's out there that you can integrate, you can do that here. One example I talked about earlier was phones. And I believe, there it is, Ring Central. This is not an advertisement for Ring Central, but a lot of folks in the agency space use Ring Central. And so this is one example of an app you can add in Teams. Now, rather than having the soft phone on the desktop, you can use the app inside of Teams and have a single view to work from. That's all I'm going to say about apps for now. We're going to dive over to these other areas. I'll remind you, your calendar is here, right? You can see your Outlook calendar. I don't have anything on it. It's the same calendar you have. Hiding under this little new meeting type are different kinds of meetings you can have. We're in a meeting of type webinar. And so if you're curious what other kinds of events you might be able to do for your organization or your customers, check these out. Some of them are free, baked into the license you're paying for. Others have more premium features. We're actually using what's called the Teams Premium experience for this webinar, so we can get several different added benefits for marketing, analytics, engagement, Copilot, chat-based AI notes, and those kinds of things. So that was just a quick moment on there. We did cover earlier calls with a brief picture. I'm not calling anyone. Here's the files picker. So just a note, if you haven't been here in a while, You will note that if you save things in OneDrive, they will show here now, and you can see your OneDrive and SharePoint accessible locations. And so under shared libraries, these are the different SharePoint sources where documents may live, and you can quickly get to them, edit them, navigate them right inside of Teams. And so that's just a quick 50. Chris is asking a question. Go ahead, Chris.
I just, that last part to me was really powerful. And once you bring an Excel document or a PowerPoint document or a Word document in to Teams in that place,
Yep.
Now you don't have to worry about saving it. You don't have to worry about emailing it. Everybody who you've given granted access to can kind of get in and see it all at the same time and collaborate on it. And I know you'll talk about that via channels, but to me, that's a real powerful thing when you talk about document sharing and making sure your entire team is living off of a single version of truth, whatever it is.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. We had a question, and I'm going to try to address it with pictures about SharePoint and access. It is a little bit off target, but it makes the point a little bit better on what you're commenting on. I will caution you all that as you add additional functionality, like in app editing or a third-party app, you do see resource consumption, right? It does go up and down, right, based on what you're doing. Teams 1.0, also referred to as Teams Classic, is a beast. It's like Chrome was when it first came out, right? We don't use Chrome, we use Edge, and we recommend Edge for all of our customers because we can manage it and secure it way more better than you can with Chrome. But I just want to point out this little pill, and then we're going to dive into the chat experience. Up at the very top, if your people in your organization have allowed it, you will have an option for try the new teams, right? When you hit that, it will go ahead and take you over to the new teams experience. I am going to do the rest of the demo from V2 or the new teams. And the reason why I want to do that is because if you have the same pain as me, which is over here on the side, you belong to more than one organization, or somebody's invited you to share into their teams, but their channels all live in theirs. Up here, you can see them. If I was, this is a demo tenant, so I'm not connected to more than the demo tenant. But for instance, it might say KIte or a customer name, and that list would be up there. And then I'd have to click on it and switch to Teams, and I'd lose my whole view for my in-organization channels. This was a pain in the buns, right? And so as you look in the new Teams version, if someone outside the organization brought me into their teams and their channels, I would get a notification in this app rather than an email or something I had to babysit later. So you can live, bottom line, in multiple teams, organizations across Microsoft tenants in the 2.0 version by itself. That and performance enhancements alone are the best reasons to jump. There's a boatload of other ones. So that is a quick where we're going to dive into channels. We made some commitments here on what we said we would go over. And I do want to keep an eye on those because I am that guy who says, but you said you would cover this in the webinar and then you missed it. So I'm going to hold myself accountable. We talked about practices and setting up channels. On the screen here, you can see Contoso, which is the name of the organization or demo tenant I'm using. This is an organization-wide team. And so everyone in the organization has access here. You'll notice that every single one of these teams, you do say it twice, teams, has a general channel. That's where it starts. So if I made a new one today, it would have one and only always until you add more general. If I put a file in that general chat, which none of these actually have, it would attach it to the files location, okay? But you'll notice if we look just kind of like at business development to make this visual a little bit easier to look at, we see some very specific things that tell us how to communicate already. If I'm a part of business development from day one, if I'm sharing knowledge, I come here. If I'm wondering about opportunities, I come here. What is this? This looks like it's a daily stand-up. What is that? It's a recurring meeting that used to be in Outlook, but today lives in a channel. Well, why would I do that, Chris?
So a couple things. It eliminates the amount of inbox stuff. It eliminates the
Love it.
reply to all and the sort of the downward spiral that can come from that. Plus, everybody can see it. They can never have to worry about how it's archived, and there's a single version of truth. Another area, and you'll probably get to this, is each of those channels allows whoever's in charge, whoever builds the channel, to define who can see the channel. So you could have things it's just for leadership, something for everybody. Maybe your account executives
access
only
control, right? And maintaining who has access. The one other one that is just gold in the bank for later is auto recording of meetings that live in a single place. So this opportunities channel was set up primarily for recording the daily stand-up meeting, and that being in the daily stand-up folder, recordings folder here in this team, and only there, right? And so that's another big one. So in general, like I was saying, you can just see the organization here of what they did. They said, we're going to talk about pipeline here, opportunities here, knowledge share here, and if it doesn't fit in these 3 buckets and it lives in business development here, right? So this is labeled ways of interacting with this business unit. Right now, I'll tell you guys, I get a lot of questions all the time about what are the best ways. We actually have somebody who had asked this question, ideas for how to use workflows or best ways to set up teams. I just gave you one. I can tell you that it is never, almost always, one size, one answer. We see a lot of common things in insurance agencies. So let me name them, right? You might see a department-based channel, right? A department-based team, right? So, commercial lines, personal lines, bonds, etc. So you imagine your departments. If you have a department, you should have a team that corresponds with it, unless it is just so small that or so big that everyone maybe has a part in it. So those are a couple of other things to think about. Chris mentioned cutting people in and out of access, right? So raise your hands or do a reaction if you've ever been on chat with somebody. You've been chatting, and then they add a second person to your chat. They get your history in Teams, and then a third person in chat. And then you hire four new people. And you're like, I should have got them that information, but you never did. Why? Because you set it up as a direct chat and it should have been a channel, right? And so when you think about best practices, when you think about organizing information, when you think about knowledge sharing and keeping it tight, you want to do it in channels. And there's 2 other things I want to cover, and then we're going to jump straight to the questions, Chris, because of time. I want to honor 3 o'clock. So one other pro tip that you can do is at a channel level, you can right click it and you can go down to get email address. If you go to get email address, you will get an email, and you can see these are specific settings to that email, right? So anyone can send, only members of this team, only these domains. You can take that email, you could give it to your website guy and say, when the contact us form hits, give it this email address and it'll go right into the opportunities channel. That's one example. The second one, and let your minds grow here because we just don't have enough time to turn around all the things, but talk about workflows. Every department runs different. This is a plain example of that, right? There's a project-based team here for a bike. There's another one for a launch team. It's actually a drone for anybody who's curious. And then lastly, the BD team. Every single department has a different cadence. Every single department has a different flow, right? If we jump in here, if I work in the design team, maybe I need access to things to do my job, a workflow manual, right? You can use tabs to organize workflows. Notes, now you will see it is a OneNote. Everybody who's used OneNote knows they're really great. They're even better if you organize them in teams. So you could have a OneNote notebook for a specific channel, or you could have it at a department level. The other thing is you can add tabs for days, first-party apps, third-party apps. And so a lot of times what we do is we see websites, like a carrier website, is a great example of a resource that maybe you log into all the time and you might want to connect. Of course, I forgot my HTTPS : and then I'll post about it. So this is one concept, and just go in here and play. There's a little bit of security going on here, but you can see at the very top, I now have something called website. I could call it KIte Home and go from there and customize it. The one other thing that was asked about files, how do I get from my files here to the files in SharePoint? I just want to show that relationship real briefly here, and then we're going to fly through questions. So at the team level, every team has a channel. For every channel you have, there is a corresponding folder in SharePoint. Now, Microsoft makes this a little complicated, maybe a little more than it should be, but general files, and then hit the triple dots. If I go to open in SharePoint, I'll see a corresponding view of documents in general. I'm going to move this down, documents in general. Now, if you go back up to documents, you can see a one-to-one relationship for every channel name and the corresponding document library. The good news is this is a Microsoft team. As I add and remove people to this, they'll get access. And that's kind of the quick whirlwind. Let's jump right into questions and kind of set the pace along those lines, Chris. Yeah. Person whose hand is raised, we're going to unmute you one at a time and share or ask.
Hi, what are the advantages to putting procedures in Teams on the department channel versus using a shared drive on your PC?
Great question. There's three that come to mind. One, it's not on your local computer. So your computer or your local server drive aren't pieces of failure, right? Two, you can get it anywhere, right? As long as IT controls are in place, you can go ahead and you can access that from anywhere. Three, you can collaborate with others, whereas a shared drive, you can't actively open those files at the same time. And then lastly, the version history, like if you look at version history on Word, Excel, any of the native Office types, you can store 500 major and minor revisions and see who made those changes. Those are the big ones. The last one is security and control, internal and external to the organization. So if you share that file with me rather than attaching it, then I can pull those rights right back or change what you can edit, view, etc. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. We're going to do attendee number 2 with the question.
So you are using polls during this Teams meeting. Is that available in all versions of Teams?
Great question. So yes, they've been written and rebranded a few different times. The polls are available in the form of what used to be called forms. And so you will see some slightly different interactions with those polls again, but the experience you saw today is now native. And then, you know, for certain folks, again, you'd see it on the screen. Others, you had to drive to the chat, depending on whether you're on Teams 1.0, 2.0, web, etc. But that polls feature may be, depending on your tenant, may be called forms, but it is there for sure. Thank you. We're going to go with a
Yeah, so what is the most utilized storage solution amongst independent agents? Is it SharePoint? You know, what is it?
Yeah, I don't have the metrics on that, but I could wager a guess pretty accurately. I would say I could give you the top 3. And there's a reason for difference in terms of how people are using it and why. One is the local file server. People are still storing things on the local file server. 2, I would say OneDrive/SharePoint. They are one and the same. OneDrive is a personalized version of SharePoint. So that's the Microsoft 365. Some people still call it Office 365. Sometimes it is, but Microsoft side in the cloud. The third one, believe it or not, Dropbox, Box, Google, they're all in the same line from what we see. Chris, do you have anything else to share there on that one?
No, I would have said that the local server is probably more prevalent than most security professionals and technology professionals would want, but it works, especially in in like mid-size and smaller organizations. But for the reasons Adam referenced on the first question, something like Teams, if it's built into your suite, or is not a significant additional cost, is a way now to have storage as well as collaboration built in together.
For sure. We're going to unmute the last person.
So question around kind of organization of files and folders within your team channels. Our agency uses a lot of channels for almost like tool-based and project-based. So a tool could have, 25 different projects underneath that, and then those folders can have 20 other different folders underneath that. And our agency is trying to look towards reorganizing that a little bit, doing a lot of cleanup. Are there any suggestions when you've already started towards more of a project-based standardized folder sorting?
Yeah, great question. So there, really it's kind of hard sometimes to undo something you've started, whether it's physical or virtual, digital, however you want to say. What I would say is, you can always draw a line in the sand that says we have a certain governance or file management policy at this point for new teams or project initiatives or departments going forward. Here's how we do it. So that's one way to coexist and adopt something new. You may also find that structures may change in organization, in organizations and organizational methods, right? That makes sense based on business needs, right? And so be mindful of that. The best thing to do by far is to do whatever you do consistently and write it down. Write it down so it's readable and understood. It's not always obvious when you're looking at something with folder labels. Sometimes people add way too many words on folders. And the last piece is if you're looking to move from one structure to another that's already in place, you can do that pretty easily with some help from an IT friend or two. You may have to abandon some chat along the way, but the files you can easily move.
I was going to add on to that too. It sounds like that's a fairly decent sized organization with that kind of infrastructure already there. And it might be already part of your practices. One of the things I learned in my prior life was spending time on naming conventions so that down the road, as people come and go from organizations, there's consistency into how folders are built and what goes in them, and to be very clear about who's allowed to add a channel or add a team under a team. Those things can get away from you in a hurry if everybody can add.
Chris, that's a really good governance policy. If you're not currently limiting who can create and manage teams in your organization, ask IT to turn off the ability for people to create teams. That'll start the conversation further. The other thing, expanding it and really zooming in on SharePoint as a file storage mechanism. There's something called taxonomy and, ways to build that in. It is built to be a file management system. And so if you are a larger organization, you want to look to doing things like that, taxonomy and some of the more, kind of enterprise-like features on file management to save you the time and build those processes into controls. Great question.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Yeah, I just, really deeply appreciate those of you that joined us today, took time out of your day. Hopefully we were able to add some value and at least, if not some things you can deploy tomorrow, at least some different things to think about for your organization as it relates to leveraging what you got and not having to go out and recreate the wheel with technology. We'd be grateful from the Big I and ACT if you wanted to learn more about what we do and some of the webinars we do with all of our partners. Right there's our website. You can find us on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. And I'm going to hand it over to Adam and just say thank you again publicly, and then just, knuckle bump as a friend for your expertise today and what you guys are doing at KIte.
Yeah, for sure. So like Chris said, we are on the socials. That's something I hear on podcasters all the time. We are on LinkedIn. We have a YouTube channel. Our marketing team, we have a second person that we added to our marketing team this year, and they do an awesome job of making sure the content we do gets shared. So please check us out there. And then also stay tuned, because I think you might see us again in an audience near you soon. Until then, be well, stay safe, give somebody a hug. Have a great day.
That's right. Thanks, everybody.
Hello. Thanks for sticking around for the post show. Some of you had asked some questions inside the chat that we weren't able to get to during the live webinar, so we figured we'd address them here at the end. Note that we are sending out a resource that will also link below where you can see some of these answers in more detailed view, as well as with visuals and other training material that you may find useful. First question that was asked was, if we have a department and we create a team for that department, the general chats are saved in the OneDrive folder. Can only members of that team access that folder other than management? The answer is yes. When you create a team, the folks that are members of said team, as well as the owners, are the individuals that can access those files. The files are organized in a folder structure that follows the channels inside of your team. So if you have 3 channels in a given team, general, meetings, customers, whatever the names are, you always have general as the first. You'll find 3 folders that correspond. And as you put files in chat, they show up in those folders. You can also lock down membership based on specific folks that are inside the team you've already created. So let's say you have a team that has 50 people in it, but you only want 5 to have access to a particular chat channel and associated files. You can create what's called a private channel. When you do that, it just locks it down for those folks that you've scoped. Lastly, if you need to add folks to the team, you can go ahead and use help from IT to add them as members, or folks that are already owners of that team can add folks themselves. We also got a question that asked, how can admins and department heads search for documents in OneDrive? Great. This sounds like more of an IT administrative like question, but anywhere in Microsoft 365 where you have access, you can use search in the browser or also on SharePoint, as well as things like frequently accessed documents. If you also sync those files with the OneDrive client, whether they're your personal OneDrive files or shared files that live in SharePoint, you can search on the local desktop computer or across mobile. Search is always probably at the top in the middle. Look for the magnifying glass and then just go ahead and click in and search. If for some reason an admin or a department head needs access for files outside of SharePoint, like for instance, maybe in a particular company member or employee's OneDrive, that kind of thing isn't left for administrative control by departments, but you can ask IT to provide you a link, and they do have a mechanism to do that, one at a time and for a brief duration of time. Another question came in that asked, what is the approximate cost for Teams? Great question. They do have a standalone version of Teams that I think starts around $3 or $4 now. But by the time you add the cost of almost any one of the other Microsoft 365 services, you'll find that it's cheaper to just buy one of the other products with Teams already bundled into it. Basic plans on the Microsoft 365 basic plans start at $6 a month for an annual commit now, and that does also include the license for Teams as well as OneDrive and files in the web along with the email address. So I think you'll find it cheaper to bundle it, but if you're just looking to ramp up and you haven't yet made that step into Microsoft 365, there is a starter version of Teams available for you for about $3. Where are my Teams conversations kept? Someone else asked. They were no longer in Outlook under the conversation history file. Yeah, great observation. So Teams, like most things in Microsoft, brings information together from multiple places. So files, for instance, they live in SharePoint and OneDrive, but they're surfaced in Teams. And then conversations actually were stored inside of your Exchange mailbox and therefore available by way of the Outlook client for a long time. The actual conversation history lives natively in Teams. There are pieces of it that do get cached to the local computer, but the best thing to do from historical purposes is to have a backup just in case through a third party, or to enforce first party compliance controls to make sure that if things get deleted, then they're actually recoverable later at a date and time. Also, you can put granularity in your conversation retention, as well as what things can be deleted or not, or edited even in the back end of Teams with the help from IT.
Another question came in about how do you encourage your team from turning on their camera? Well, this is actually something that I think a lot of people make more awkward than it should be. My recommendation is to just say the words, hey, can you turn your camera on? I'd love to see your face. Sometimes that's a little bit more abrasive than most folks are comfortable with. So maybe a softer start, something along the lines of, hey, in the interest of really trying to connect here while we're all not in a physical space anymore, we really do want to encourage you to keep your cameras on. If that doesn't work, something along the lines of ground rules for team meetings is something you can also do as well. That's a little bit of a harder start than maybe encouragement, but it all starts by setting the lead, and you can do that yourself by just turning your camera on, even if you're the only one in the room. I do it all the time. Sometimes it's tricky to stare at myself, but I always throw it out there. Does anybody else not have a broken camera today? Make light humor of it. At the end of the day, people are pretty relational, even if we avoid it where we can. How do you grant permissions to files? Great question. So files live inside of OneDrive or SharePoint. Typically, that's where most of your files live as regards to Microsoft 365. Almost every file that you have has a share button in the upper right-hand corner wherever you're accessing it. And so look for that. The share experience is pretty much the same across the board, whether you're sharing from Outlook, whether you're sharing from Excel, whether you're sharing from Teams or SharePoint. Anywhere you're going to have a file, you're going to have a similar control set. Share dialog box with options. Note that IT does have the ability to set controls where they can prevent you from doing something you might not want to, like sharing it outside your company or sharing it without encryption. But look for the share sheet. It's a little arrow with pointing to the right, and it has the word share on it. Another question that said, I'm aware that Teams channel has a SharePoint site. How do I access it and edit it so that way files are available? Great question. Inside of any one of your channels in Teams, if you start with the general channel, you'll notice the files tab at the top. It's right in the middle above the chat. Just click files. Hiding down to the far right hand side of your view, you'll find 3 triple dots. You can click open in SharePoint. If you do that, it'll land you in the general folder for that team. And then from there, it's pretty intuitive. Another thing you can do to easily get back to it later is look for the star to favorite it in the upper right-hand corner. From there, you can go ahead and easily get back to it by landing on your SharePoint homepage. The SharePoint home site is accessible in the top left-hand corner when you click on the hamburger. And I know my left and rights are a little backwards from the camera view, but I hope you get the point. Upper left-hand corner has the hamburger up there, and you can click there and click on SharePoint, and then anything you've favorited will surface there in the future. One other thing that you can do to make it a little bit easier to navigate around your files is if you click the plus button inside of any Teams channel you're in, you can add a shortcut. One of the things that I do is add a shortcut to a URL or a SharePoint site. And sometimes that's a little bit easier to jump you straight to all your files and the associated folders with the different channel names than having to go the convoluted route of clicking here, there, and everywhere. Lastly, you can also sync the files. After you're in SharePoint, you can click sync or add shortcut to OneDrive, and those will allow you to either sync those to your local computer or jump to those files faster from the OneDrive homepage, either in your browser, on mobile, or on the desktop client. Last question was, any ideas for how to best use workflows in Teams? I think this question really was centered around how do I kind of navigate them and what are the best use cases maybe for my department. Truly, uses are going to vary, and so will mileage based on what you need to do and how much work you're doing, both in product, Teams, Outlook, etc., or outside of the product. My recommendation is starting with questions like, could that email have been a chat? Or what sites do I frequently go to? Or would collaborating on a shared notebook be effective in terms of communication? Things like that are the kinds of things to engage your peers or leaders with and ask them. And then from there, get buy-in, get understanding, get a few friends of IT, have them give things a try, Most times we find that folks will create workflows that you don't think about. The most important thing to workflows is consistency and communication in what those workflows are, so you can have adoption at the whole, all of your team, and then leverage those efficiencies. Hope that's helpful. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out with me for that after hours cutscene. Be well. See you next time.